The moment I stepped onto the driveway, something didn't sit right. My house, my sanctuary, had an unfamiliar car parked right in front of it. A sleek, black vehicle that screamed money and arrogance. It wasn't mine, and it sure as hell didn't belong to my wife, Ashley. I pushed the front door open, stepping inside with deliberate calmness. The house was quiet, too quiet. The lights were on in the upstairs bedroom, an oddity considering Ashley rarely stayed up late. At first, I thought she might have had company over, a friend or a neighbor. But deep down, I knew. Call it instinct, experience, or the cold logic of a man who'd spent years analyzing situations before acting, I knew what I was about to walk into. My steps up the staircase were slow and measured, each one a preparation for what I might find. As I reached the top, muffled voices seeped through the crack in the bedroom door. Laughter. Hers, light and flirtatious. His, smug and deep. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the door open, and there they were. My wife of 25 years, tangled in the sheets with a man I didn't recognize. He was younger than me, maybe mid-40s, dressed in nothing but his ego and arrogance. Ashley gasped, clutching the blanket to her chest, while the bastard froze like a deer in headlights. "Who the hell are you?" My voice cut through the room like a blade. The man stammered, trying to gather his clothes, but I was faster. I grabbed the bedside lamp, yanked it from its base, and hurled it at the wall just inches from his head. The crash was deafening. He flinched, losing whatever dignity he had left. "You think you can come into my house?" I barked, stepping closer. He tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Ashley started to say something, but I shot her a look that stopped her cold. "Shut your mouth," I said, my tone sharp and unforgiving. "I'll deal with you after I'm done with him." The man made the mistake of reaching for his pants. I caught him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. "You've got guts showing up here, I'll give you that," I growled, slamming him against the wall. "But you leaving with a lesson you won't forget." With one swift motion, I dragged him toward the door and shoved him out into the hallway. He stumbled, trying to regain his balance, but I didn't let up. A hard shove sent him tumbling down the staircase. He landed with a thud, groaning as he scrambled to his feet. I followed him down, slow and deliberate. "Get out," I said, opening the front door. But before he could step outside, I grabbed him again, yanking him close. "You done. You don't come near her. You don't come near this house. If I see you again, I won't stop at throwing you out." I shoved him out the door, watching as he stumbled barefoot onto the driveway. His car keys jingled as they hit the pavement, and he scrambled to pick them up. I tossed his clothes after him, each piece landing in a humiliating heap. "Run," I said coldly, and he did. I stood in the doorway, watching until the taillights of his car disappeared into the night. Only then did I turn back toward the house. Ashley was still upstairs, probably shaking with fear or plotting her excuses. It didn't matter. Whatever she had to say wouldn't change what I'd already decided. When I reached the bedroom, she looked at me with tear-streaked eyes. "Jack, Don't," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. "Pack your things. You leaving tonight." She started to argue, but I held up a hand. "I don't care what you have to say. You made your choice, and now you'll live with it. You've got until sunrise to get out. After that, you gone for good." For the first time, she looked genuinely terrified. Good. She should be. I turned my back to her, walking out of the room and slamming the door shut behind me. There was no sadness, no regret. Just cold determination. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I sat in the living room, replaying everything that had unfolded earlier that night. Upstairs, Ashley was silently packing her belongings. The sound of her footsteps was muted, hesitant, as if she feared disturbing me. This house, once a place of comfort and stability, now felt foreign. But I wasn't about to let emotions cloud my judgment. I'd built my life on discipline and calculated decisions, and this moment demanded nothing less. She betrayed me. She betrayed the life we had spent 25 years building together. 25 years of sacrifices, shared struggles, and trust, all discarded for cheap thrills. Unlike her, I wouldn't let impulse dictate my actions. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor as I moved. My resolve hardened further. The first step was clear: I had to ensure she couldn't use what we had built together against me. I opened my laptop, placed it on the kitchen table, and logged into our shared bank account. With the precision I'd honed over years of making tough decisions, I began transferring the bulk of the funds into a personal account I'd set up years ago for emergencies. It was a quiet insurance policy, one that now felt like a stroke of foresight. She thought she had the upper hand, sneaking around and playing her little games. She was about to find out otherwise. Next, I froze all the joint credit cards. I left enough money in the account to cover her basic needs for a few days, but not enough to fund any elaborate plans or legal maneuvers. If she wanted to rebuild her life, she could do it from scratch, just like I had. The house, fortunately, was solely in my name, a choice I had insisted on when we purchased it. Not out of distrust, but because I believed in being prepared for any eventuality. That decision now served as a shield against any attempts she might make to stake a claim. Once the finances were secured, I turned my attention to gathering evidence. Betrayal was one thing, leaving her no room for denial or manipulation was another. I retrieved Ashley's phone from the bedroom. She looked at me with watery, red-rimmed eyes but didn't say a word. She knew better than to test my patience. Back at the kitchen table, I unlocked her phone. Her conversations with the man, Michael, according to her contacts, told me everything I needed to know. Flirtatious texts, explicit rendezvous plans, even photos. Each one was another nail in the coffin of any defense she might attempt. I forwarded the messages to my own email and took screenshots for backup. Everything was stored in a folder labeled simply evidence. If she thought she could twist the story, she was in for a rude awakening. With the immediate logistics handled, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. This wasn't enough. What I'd done so far was just the beginning. Ashley and her lover needed to understand that betrayal came with a price. I pulled up Michael's social media profiles. Predictably, his accounts were filled with curated nonsense, pictures of him on yachts, in expensive suits, flaunting a lifestyle that screamed overcompensation. He worked as a regional manager at a logistics firm, just big enough to make his position vulnerable. I noted every detail: his workplace, his hobbies, his circle of friends. A plan began forming, one that would ensure he felt the weight of his decisions in every corner of his life. By the time dawn broke, Ashley was gone. She hadn't argued further, and I hadn't offered any additional words. The packed suitcase by the door was proof enough that she understood the finality of my decision. I stood in the doorway as she walked to her car. Her tearful gaze lingered on me. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." "Too late," I replied coldly, shutting the door behind her. The house was silent, but it wasn't an oppressive silence. It was liberating. This was my house again. My life. And with her gone, I could focus on what came next. The first move was simple. I sent an anonymous email to Michael's employer, detailing his affair and framing it as a breach of company policy. Attached to the email were select screenshots of their messages, just enough to raise eyebrows and provoke an investigation. It wasn't about shaming him. It was about destabilizing him. Men like Michael thrived on their public image. Stripping that away was the first step in dismantling his life. Next, I reached out to a friend in real estate who owed me a favor. It wasn't hard to track down Michael's address. He rented a flashy apartment, one that was clearly a cornerstone of his image. My friend agreed to quietly spread rumors among landlords about his behavior, ensuring his housing options would become very limited very soon. As the first pieces of my plan fell into place, I allowed myself a rare moment of satisfaction. But this was just the start. Ashley and Michael had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to stop until both of them understood the consequences of their choices. Morning light poured through the windows, highlighting the emptiness of the kitchen. Ashley's things were gone, along with her car, which had disappeared down the driveway hours ago. The silence left in her wake wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, almost tangible, and filled with purpose. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop in front of me. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind, each detail sharpening my focus. Ashley's betrayal had been a wake-up call, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of what needed to be done. The man she brought into my life, Michael, needed to face consequences. He had crossed a line that no one should cross, and men like him often believed they were untouchable. They relied on their reputations, their jobs, their outward appearances. What they didn't realize was how easy it was to strip all of that away. I began with his career. A quick online search revealed his professional profile. Michael worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. His page was full of the typical corporate jargon about leadership and innovation, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the weakness beneath the surface. His polished appearance, his smug smile in the profile photo, these were all just masks. I drafted an email to his employer. The tone was neutral and professional. I didn't need to exaggerate or embellish, the truth was damning enough. I attached screenshots of explicit conversations between Michael and Ashley, ensuring there was no doubt about his behavior. The subject line was clear and direct, confidential, concerns regarding employee conduct. Sending the email felt like setting the first piece of a domino line into motion. Men like Michael built their careers on perception. Cracking that foundation was just the start. But his professional life wasn't the only thing I intended to dismantle. Social media offered a glimpse into his personal world. His Instagram was filled with carefully curated posts showcasing expensive meals, luxury vacations, and designer clothes. It was an image designed to project confidence and success, but to me, it looked like desperation. A closer look revealed something interesting: his high-rise apartment, prominently featured in several posts, wasn't owned. It was rented. That detail was important. People like Michael relied on their surroundings to maintain their facade. Taking that away would strike deeper than he realized. I picked up my phone and called a friend who worked in real estate. Years ago, I had helped him out of a tight spot, and he hadn't forgotten. I explained the situation without giving away too much, and he understood immediately. A few well-placed words to Michael's landlord would ensure that he became more trouble than he was worth. In a neighborhood like his, landlords didn't tolerate tenants who could bring scandal or embarrassment. With the first steps of my plan in motion, I leaned back in my chair. The house around me felt quieter, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. Instead, the silence felt like a clean slate, a chance to rebuild on my own terms. Michael's life was beginning to crack. He might not feel it yet, but the cracks were there. His career and his image, the things he valued most, were under attack. And this was only the start. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about revenge for its own sake. It was about taking back control. Michael and Ashley had both taken something from me, something I couldn't replace. But they wouldn't walk away unscathed. That much I could guarantee. As I closed the laptop and stood up, stretching muscles stiff from sitting too long, I knew there was more to do. This wasn't the end of Michael's downfall. It was merely the beginning of a carefully planned response. The house felt foreign without her. The quiet that had settled in after Ashley left wasn't peaceful, it was sharp, edged with the weight of everything I needed to do. Her car had disappeared down the driveway hours ago, but her betrayal lingered like an aftertaste. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry anymore either. What I felt was a cold, calculated clarity. Michael had no idea what he had stepped into. Men like him were used to skating through life without facing consequences. They relied on their reputations and the illusions they created to shield them from reality. My job was to make sure those illusions shattered. I sat down at the kitchen table and reopened my laptop. The evidence I had gathered was already organized, screenshots of their messages, photos, and all the details Michael had left out in the open for anyone to find. His career was my first target. A quick search online had revealed that Michael worked as a regional manager for a logistics company. His professional profile was exactly what I'd expected, buzzwords like strategic thinker and team-oriented leader plastered everywhere. His photos showed him in a perfectly tailored suit, radiating the smug confidence of someone who thought he was untouchable. I drafted an email to his employer's HR department. The tone was professional and factual. There was no need for emotion, the evidence spoke for itself. I attached several incriminating screenshots of his conversations with Ashley and included enough details to make his misconduct impossible to ignore. The subject line was straightforward, a confidential, serious concerns about employee conduct. I hit send without hesitation. It wasn't about satisfaction or revenge, it was about precision. Michael's reputation was a critical piece of his success. If I could take that away, the rest would follow. But I wasn't done. His personal life was just as vulnerable, if not more so. Instagram painted a picture of a man who wanted to be envied. His feed was full of photos of extravagant dinners, weekend getaways, and designer suits. Everything about it screamed, "Look at me." It didn't take much effort to uncover the truth behind his curated image. His high-rise apartment, featured prominently in many of his posts, wasn't even his, it was rented. That detail was a weakness, one I intended to exploit. I made a call to a friend who worked in real estate. We'd known each other for years, and I had helped him out of a tough spot once. Now it was his turn to return the favor. I didn't need to explain much, he understood enough to know what I wanted. Within hours, Michael's landlord would receive a polite but firm warning about his potentially disruptive tenant. In neighborhoods like Michael's, even a hint of trouble was often enough to terminate a lease. By the time I closed my laptop, the first phase of my plan was well underway. But there was still more to do. Ashley wasn't going to escape unscathed. Her work as a freelance designer relied entirely on her reputation. Small businesses and boutique owners made up most of her client base, and trust was everything in that world. Planting doubt wouldn't be difficult. I created another email account and sent messages to a handful of her past clients. I kept the tone polite but hinted at missed deadlines and unprofessional behavior. My goal wasn't to destroy her outright, just to make potential clients second-guess hiring her. Reputation was everything in her field, and even a small whisper of doubt could ripple through her professional life. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the house felt less oppressive. The weight of betrayal was still there, but it had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Michael and Ashley thought they could disrupt my life and move on without consequences. They underestimated me. The cracks in their lives were already forming, and I wasn't going to stop until those cracks turned into collapses. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about balance, about ensuring they faced the same instability they had brought into my life. The moves I'd made so far were calculated and deliberate, just the beginning of a larger plan. Michael and Ashley had underestimated the man they thought they could betray, and that was their greatest mistake. The house was quiet, a silence that felt purposeful rather than empty. Ashley was gone, and with her departure, the lies that had once suffocated this space seemed to dissipate. I wasn't dwelling on what had been lost. There was no time for that. My focus was fixed entirely on what needed to be done next. Michael had built his life on appearances. His carefully crafted image of success and stability was his greatest vulnerability. He had no idea how fragile it all was, how easily it could be dismantled. Sitting at the kitchen table, I reopened his Facebook profile. I had spent hours combing through his posts, looking for patterns, connections, and weaknesses. His friends list was extensive, filled with colleagues, relatives, and old acquaintances. But I wasn't interested in casting a wide net. To do the most damage, I needed precision. I selected 3 people from his network. The first was a coworker who often liked and commented on his posts but never seemed overly familiar. The second was a distant cousin, someone who seemed to admire him from afar. The third was an old college friend who hadn't interacted with him much recently. They were perfect, close enough to take the information seriously, but distant enough to spread it without confronting him directly. Using a temporary email account, I drafted my messages. "Hi," I wrote to the first recipient. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I recently came across something involving Michael, and I thought you should be aware. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but I felt it was important to share this." Attached was a screenshot of one of Michael's conversations with Ashley, just suggestive enough to raise questions but not explicit enough to seem fabricated. I sent similar messages to the other 2 targets, each slightly different in tone but carrying the same intent, to plant seeds of doubt. Social circles, like reputations, were fragile things. Once cracks appeared, they spread quickly. When the messages were sent, I leaned back and imagined the ripples they would cause. Michael wouldn't notice it immediately, but his coworkers and friends would start to look at him differently. Questions would be asked, and his carefully maintained facade would begin to crumble. With Michael's social circle in motion, I turned my attention back to Ashley. Her career as a freelance designer relied heavily on trust and word-of-mouth recommendations. Even the slightest hint of unreliability could devastate her business. I visited her LinkedIn profile, scrolling through her glowing testimonials and polished project showcases. It was clear she had worked hard to build her professional image, but I knew how easily it could be undermined. Using another temporary email account, I sent messages to a handful of her clients. The tone was polite but critical, designed to sound like a genuine complaint. I wanted to share my experience working with Ashley, one message read. While her designs were creative, the overall process was disappointing. Deadlines were missed, and communication was inconsistent. I hope this was just a one-off issue, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I knew how damaging even vague feedback like this could be. In her field, reputation was everything. A few whispers of dissatisfaction would be enough to make potential clients think twice before hiring her. By the time I finished, the sun had climbed high into the sky. The house felt lighter now, as though the weight of betrayal had finally lifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Michael and Ashley had underestimated me. They thought they could walk away from what they'd done without consequences. They were wrong. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. They had brought chaos into my life, and now I was returning the favor. This was only the beginning. The morning passed slowly, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. But the stillness wasn't distracting, it was empowering. Every step I took was carefully planned, each action meant to tighten the grip around Michael and Ashley. They thought they could walk away from what they had done, but they had underestimated me. Michael's professional life had been the first to feel the pressure. His employer now had enough evidence to question his character, and I was certain the rumors among his colleagues had begun to spread. But his professional reputation wasn't the only thing he valued. He had created a social life that mirrored his image of success, flashy and shallow, yet essential to his ego. That was my next target. I revisited the messages I had sent to his coworkers and friends, imagining the whispers and sideways glances they would generate. People in his circle wouldn't confront him directly, they'd talk behind his back, passing along the screenshots I had provided. Michael's world thrived on perception, and perception was easy to manipulate. But there was still more to do. Social media gave me a map of his connections, and it didn't take long to find someone who might deliver a stronger blow. Among his tagged photos, I noticed a woman who appeared frequently, someone named Christine. From her captions and comments, I deduced that she was more than just a casual friend. Using a new temporary email address, I reached out to Christine. My tone was measured, careful not to seem accusatory. "Hi, Christine," the email began. "I don't know if you're aware, but I came across something involving Michael that I thought you should see." I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but after thinking it over, I felt it was the right thing to do. I attached another screenshot, this one slightly more explicit but still enough to spark doubt without overwhelming her. Christine's potential reaction didn't matter as much as the ripple effect it would create. Whether she believed me or not, the seed was planted. Satisfied with my work on Michael, I shifted my focus back to Ashley. Her professional life wasn't just a source of income, it was her identity. She took pride in her creativity and independence, and I knew exactly how to attack those pillars. Scrolling through her website, I noted the client testimonials prominently displayed on the homepage. Each one praised her reliability, her ability to meet deadlines, her professionalism. They were all lies. I created another temporary email account and reached out to one of her recent clients. The tone of my message was polite but firm, designed to sound like genuine feedback from someone who had worked with her. "Hello," I wrote. "I recently collaborated with Ashley on a design project, and while her ideas were creative, the experience left much to be desired. Communication was inconsistent, and deadlines were missed more than once. I felt it was important to share my experience so you can make an informed decision about future work." I sent similar messages to 2 other clients listed on her website. The idea wasn't to destroy her reputation outright, it was to create enough uncertainty that potential clients would hesitate to hire her. The satisfaction wasn't immediate. I wasn't looking for instant results. This was about strategy, about watching their lives unravel piece by piece. Michael and Ashley had taken what I had built and shattered it. Now, I was returning the favor. By mid-afternoon, I received a notification that one of my earlier messages about Michael had been opened. Christine had seen the email. I imagined her reaction, the questions she might be asking herself, the conversations she might start having. She didn't need to believe me outright, she only needed to doubt him enough to spread the word. As I stood in the kitchen, pouring another cup of coffee, the weight that had been pressing down on me for weeks felt lighter. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about balance, about taking back control of a life they had tried to steal. Michael and Ashley thought they were untouchable, that they could do what they wanted without facing consequences. But they were learning, slowly and painfully, how wrong they were. The house was quiet again as the evening settled in, the kind of quiet that came with certainty. I didn't need to rush. The cracks I had created in their lives would spread on their own, weakening their foundations until everything collapsed. This wasn't the end. It was just another step forward. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the house into dim, amber light. The stillness of the space around me was a stark contrast to the turmoil I knew was unfolding elsewhere. Michael and Ashley's worlds were no longer as stable as they had been. Every carefully placed step I had taken was starting to bear fruit. I checked my laptop again, opening the email account I had used to contact Christine, one of Michael's closer connections. A reply from her sat in my inbox, the subject line reading, "What's going on?" Her message was short and direct. "Who are you, and why are you sending this to me? If this is real, I need more proof. If it's not, leave me alone." I could sense the doubt in her words, the cracks in her perception of Michael already forming. It was exactly what I had hoped for. Christine didn't need to believe everything immediately. A seed of doubt was enough, it would grow on its own, nourished by the inconsistencies she would start to notice in his behavior. I crafted a measured response, attaching a second screenshot of Michael's conversations with Ashley. This one was more explicit, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "I'm sorry to bring this to you," I wrote, "but I thought it was important you knew. I'm not looking to cause problems, but if you have questions, maybe you should ask him directly. Hitting send, I leaned back in my chair, imagining the ripple effects this single exchange would create. Christine didn't need to confront Michael. Her uncertainty alone would spread through his circle, reaching others in quiet conversations and side comments. Satisfied, I turned my attention to Ashley. Her professional life was unraveling in smaller but equally significant ways. A notification from one of the email accounts I had used earlier caught my eye. It was a response from a potential client I had contacted about her. "Thanks for letting me know," the message read. "I was considering hiring Ashley for a new project, but I'll definitely keep this in mind. Sorry to hear about your experience." Even a single lost opportunity carried weight in a field as reputation-dependent as hers. Ashley's career wasn't built on stability, it was built on perception. And perception was something I could easily manipulate. Opening another email account, I drafted a new message, this time targeting a different client listed on her website. I posed as someone who had struggled with her unprofessionalism, mentioning delays and communication issues that had made a project unnecessarily difficult. The message was polite but firm, carefully written to sound credible. Once the email was sent, I leaned back, satisfied with the day's progress. Michael and Ashley were both starting to feel the pressure, though I doubted either of them had fully realized the extent of what was happening yet. But they would. As the evening deepened, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. The house felt different now, lighter, as though the lies and betrayals that had once filled it had finally begun to dissipate. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring they both understood what it meant to lose control of the lives they had so recklessly dismantled. Michael had built his life on a foundation of false confidence, leaning on his professional success and social connections to validate his choices. Ashley, on the other hand, had crafted a career around trust and reliability, traits she clearly didn't value in her personal life. Both of them had chosen to betray me, and now they were paying the price. The satisfaction I felt wasn't in their suffering, it was in the balance being restored. For too long, they had taken without consequence. Now, every step they took would be overshadowed by the cracks I had created in their worlds. Tomorrow, I would continue. There were more messages to send, more subtle moves to make. But for now, I let the stillness of the night settle around me. The storm they had unleashed on my life was now theirs to weather. The morning began in quiet contemplation. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting an amber hue across the room. I had woken early, not out of anxiety but with a sense of clarity. The momentum I had built was undeniable, yet I knew there was more to be done. The cracks in Michael and Ashley's lives were growing deeper, but they hadn't fully shattered, yet. I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, my laptop already open. Michael's social media accounts were the first place I turned. His once active profiles, filled with comments and likes, now seemed subdued. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. One post, a photo from a recent company event, caught my attention. The comments had shifted from congratulatory to awkwardly polite, as if people weren't sure how to approach him anymore. A few comments even hinted at unease. "Hope you're doing okay, Mike," one read, vague but pointed. The seeds of doubt I had planted were starting to sprout, and I intended to water them. Opening the email account I had used to reach out to his co-workers and friends, I composed a few more messages. "Hi," I began one email. "I'm sorry to bring this to your attention, but I felt it was important. I've come across some troubling information about Michael and thought you should know." I attached screenshots of his conversations with Ashley, carefully choosing ones that were suggestive but not overly explicit. My goal wasn't to shock, it was to erode trust. With those emails sent, I turned my focus back to Ashley. Her professional reputation was her lifeline, and I was determined to sever it. Visiting her LinkedIn profile, I noticed a post advertising her design services. It had only a handful of likes and no comments, a stark contrast to her usual engagement. I opened another temporary email account and drafted messages to several potential clients she had reached out to recently. Hello, one email read. I wanted to share my experience working with Ashley. While her designs were creative, the overall process was disappointing. Deadlines were missed, and communication was inconsistent. I just thought you should know before making a decision. The tone was neutral, almost reluctant, designed to sound believable. Once the emails were sent, I leaned back in my chair, imagining the ripple effects. Ashley's work depended entirely on trust, and even small doubts could cripple her ability to secure new projects. By midday, I decided to revisit my anonymous social media accounts to monitor their activity. Michael's posts had grown sporadic, and his tone had shifted. His captions, once confident and self-assured, now read as defensive and hollow. One of his most recent posts showed him sitting alone in a cafe, staring at the camera with a forced smile. Taking time to reflect and grow, the caption read. It was a weak attempt to control the narrative, but I knew it wouldn't work. The pressure I had applied was beginning to show, and Michael's facade was cracking. Ashley's situation wasn't much better. Her most recent business-related post had no interactions, a clear sign that the whispers I had started were taking effect. The confidence she had once exuded was starting to falter, and it was only a matter of time before she felt the full weight of her decisions. As I closed my laptop, the house around me felt different. It was quiet, but it wasn't an oppressive silence. It was a silence filled with purpose, a space finally free from the lies that had once suffocated it. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Michael and Ashley had both believed they could betray me without consequence, but they were learning now how wrong they had been. Their lives were no longer stable. Every step they took, every move they made, was overshadowed by the cracks in the foundations they had built. And I wasn't finished yet. The evening fell quietly, wrapping the house in a soft, dim glow as the last light of the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. The stillness in the air wasn't oppressive, it was purposeful. Michael and Ashley had spent years building their lives on lies, and now the weight of those lies was starting to crush them. I opened my laptop, my focus shifting back to Michael's social media accounts. His most recent posts showed the strain. The polished confidence he once exuded was gone, replaced by a hollow attempt to maintain appearances. One of his posts caught my eye, a photo of him sitting at a cafe with a few friends, his smile tight and his posture stiff. Appreciating the real ones in challenging times, the caption read. It was a weak attempt at saving face. The comments below the photo were sparse, many of them generic and uninspired. People who had once filled his posts with praise were now noticeably absent. Satisfied, I turned to my email. A new message from one of Michael's colleagues confirmed what I had suspected. Thanks for reaching out, it read. We've heard similar rumors about Michael, and this lines up with what some of us have noticed. I can't say much, but I think his position here might be in jeopardy. The words carried the weight of inevitability. Michael's career, the anchor of his carefully curated identity, was slipping away. I composed another email, this time addressed to someone in an executive role at his company. My tone was formal and restrained. I regret having to share this, I wrote, but as someone who values professionalism, I felt it was necessary. The attached screenshots raise significant concerns about Michael's behavior and judgment. I trust you'll handle this matter appropriately. Hitting send, I knew this would likely seal his fate. With Michael's situation under control, I shifted my attention to Ashley. Her business relied entirely on her ability to project reliability and creativity, qualities she had proven incapable of maintaining in her personal life. Her LinkedIn profile was as polished as ever, but her recent posts had garnered little engagement. Her most recent project announcement had gone unnoticed, a clear indication that my earlier efforts to tarnish her reputation were taking effect. Using another temporary email address, I drafted messages to several of her clients. Hello, I began one message. I've worked with Ashley on a project in the past, and unfortunately, the experience wasn't positive. While her designs showed potential, the process was marred by missed deadlines and poor communication. I thought it was important to share this to help inform your decision. The messages were carefully worded to sound credible without appearing malicious. I sent several variations, tailoring each one to the recipient. By the time I finished, the house had grown dark. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated the room as I leaned back in my chair, considering the damage I had caused. Michael and Ashley's lives were no longer stable. Every carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble under the pressure I had applied. They might not yet realize the full extent of their downfall, but it was coming. Michael's attempts to salvage his image had turned desperate. His Instagram story showed him out at a bar, laughing with a group of friends. It looked like he was having fun, but the exaggerated gestures and too loud laughter betrayed the truth. He was performing, clinging to the illusion of control. Ashley, on the other hand, had gone quiet. Her social media accounts were stagnant, her business page untouched for days. The whispers I had planted among her clients were spreading, making her future as uncertain as Michael's. Standing by the window, I gazed out at the darkened street. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of closure nearing. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about making them understand what it meant to lose control of their lives, to feel the same chaos they had inflicted on mine. Tomorrow, I would deliver the final blows. Tonight, I let the silence settle, a reminder that their storm was now their own to endure. The night was calm, the type of silence that spoke volumes. The house felt still but not empty. No, this quiet carried meaning. Sitting at the kitchen table, I stared at the glow of my laptop screen. Michael and Ashley's lives were unraveling, but I wasn't finished. Tonight, I would deliver the last strike, ensuring there was no return from the ruin they had brought upon themselves. Michael's career had always been his fortress, the center of his pride. Taking that away had been my first goal, but now it was time to make sure the damage was permanent. Opening my email, I found a new response from his workplace. "We appreciate the information provided," it began. "We've conducted a review and are addressing the matter according to company policies. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." Though the words were vague, the implication was clear: Michael's position was no longer secure. The man who had relied so heavily on his professional reputation was now watching it crumble. But one more action remained. Using a different email account, I sent a carefully crafted message to his landlord. "Hello," I wrote. "I wanted to bring up some concerns regarding one of your tenants, Michael, last name. There have been repeated disturbances at his unit, including loud visitors late at night. It's becoming an issue for the neighborhood, and I hope you can look into it." The email wasn't designed to have an immediate impact. It was meant to ensure that no part of his life remained stable, that even the walls of his home felt like they were closing in. Satisfied with that step, I turned to Ashley. Her world was already unsteady, but I wanted to ensure that her professional decline continued. Her business had thrived on reputation, on word-of-mouth recommendations. Taking that away was key. I opened a local directory where her design services were listed. Posing as a former client, I submitted a review that was subtle but effective. I had high hopes when I started working with Ashley, but unfortunately, my expectations weren't met, the review read. Deadlines slipped, and communication was inconsistent. While the work itself was adequate, the experience left me hesitant to recommend her. The review didn't need to be harsh, it simply needed to plant doubt. For someone like Ashley, whose career depended on trust, even a small seed of uncertainty could ripple outward. By the time I closed my laptop, the room was completely dark except for the glow of the screen. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Michael and Ashley had both made choices that shattered the life I had built, and now they were feeling the consequences. Michael's desperation was evident in his dwindling social media presence. His latest post was cryptic, a simple black square with the caption, sometimes life forces you to start over. The attempt to frame his collapse as a new beginning was transparent. The truth was plain to see, he had lost everything. His job, his social standing, his image, all gone. Ashley, on the other hand, had gone silent. Her business accounts hadn't been updated in over a week, and her personal profile was locked down. The whispers I had started in her professional circles were doing their work, ensuring that opportunities dried up one by one. As I stood by the window, looking out into the quiet street, I allowed myself a moment to reflect. This house had once felt suffocating, its walls heavy with betrayal. Now, it felt lighter, as if the air itself had shifted. This wasn't about hatred or anger. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about reclaiming what they had taken from me: control, stability, peace. They had tried to leave me with nothing, and now they were the ones standing in the ruins. The night deepened, and the weight on my shoulders finally began to ease. Tomorrow, I would move forward. But tonight, I allowed myself to savor the silence, a silence that was finally mine.